Thank you for listening in to this episode of the After Dark Show. The first story tonight is by Decorative Gentleman, and it's called Tingles. I'm an ASMR artist, or an aspiring one at least. I might be crazy for trying it, the YouTube community being pretty flush with soft whisperers and nail tappers and optometrist role players, but I think I've got something different. I read death. I guess I should explain that. While the other artists out there generally stick to relatively mundane or even pleasant scripts, or just finger a hairbrush and say nothing, I whisper about death in graphic detail. It's morbid, certainly, but there is something about the incongruity of a pleasant tingle in the word eviscerate, isn't there? Really, it started to fight the boredom of the read. ASMR probably doesn't seem like acting, the dull, one-sided dialogue and the gimmicky triggers, but it is. You have to appear interested and engaged, when your only real audience is a Nikon DSLR and a microphone with silicone ears. For me, gore was that necessary component that made it bearable. You're probably frightened right now. Oh? This knife is a Gerber Terracraft in flat sage. The color looks really nice with crimson. Link in the description below. Yeah, I plug, but an artist has to make a living, and my Patreon hasn't quite taken off yet. Let's just start here, at your navel, and work our way up to the sternum. There we go. Right along the linea alba. Does it hurt? Yeah, I bet it does. Your eyes are widening and your face has gone as white as a sheet. That's shock. Your small intestine doesn't belong on the outside and your body knows it. My performance takes a lot of anatomical research to really sell it. I have to know my way around pain, terminology, neuroreceptor pathways, referred pain, visceral pain. There was a learning curve at first. Oh, so sleepy. That's okay. This is an EpiPen. I tap my nails on the plastic cylinder, still a sucker for some of those tropes. It's an epinephrine auto-injection device, a vasopressor, and welcome back. Now where were we? Right. Did you know you have to exercise a lot of connective tissue to actually strangle someone with their own intestines? You didn't? Well, I'll show you. So far, I have a small but very committed audience. They must like the concept or the delivery. Maybe they just like my folly work. The squish of innards or an off-camera scream, muffled by a wad of gauze and 2 feet of duct tape. Seems so real. What's that? Please? Oh, please stop. No. For those who subscribe to my Patreon, well, they know my secrets. Jeremy was a rapist, and for a top-tier subscription, 2 of his victims get a behind-the-scenes look at my production. It may be messy, but sometimes the sound alone isn't what they need to get the tingles. It's the personal attention and the knowledge that when the video's over, the only thing they'll hear behind them on the walk home is silence. The next story I'll be reading is called Maggot Mandy by user XXChronicXX. Mandy was a bright student, top of her class. Other kids bullied her and made her life miserable. But she always had me to talk to. I saw what nobody else saw, a kind and caring person. She was different. A fact that made her a target for the whole school. To me, she was just Mandy, but to everyone else, she was Maggot Mandy, due to the strange pets that squirmed around inside the infected wounds covering her arms and legs. Being an outcast myself, I know how it feels to be so isolated from everyone else, so I decided to talk to her one day. And that was the day I met my best friend. Once I eventually gained her trust, she introduced me to her little pets. Douglas was the shy one. He would sometimes pop out from the pus-filled wound on her forearm, but he didn't much like strangers. Greg was the outgoing one. He would tunnel out from her flesh and crawl into her hand. He was my favorite. Such a friendly little guy. And then there was Sherm the worm, who had taken up residence in her leg. Greg didn't like Sherm that much. Mandy reckoned it was jealousy. There were many other little creatures living both in and on her body. They were her family. Mandy's mother was a prostitute, and her father was killed by a rival drug dealer. So her home life wasn't good. But, as she always said, her pets were her reason for living. But as we got older, I grew more concerned about her. Her once pretty face was covered in infected wounds, and even more maggots were living there rent-free. She had become blind in one of her eyes due to her pets eating it away, and she had grown skinny from the tapeworm she had purposefully ate. She didn't mind, though. To her, she was merely nourishing her little ones. Teachers also became concerned, so they called social services, who promptly removed Mandy from her toxic home. She was never the same after that. The doctors cleaned her entire body and rid her of the maggots and worms living inside her flesh. Mandy became depressed after losing her babies. She grew quiet and ignored all my attempts at talking to her, until one day she didn't turn up for school. I went over to her foster family's house, and they told me she had run away and the police were looking for her. 5 days later, her body was found in a field, absolutely crawling with maggots. She had sliced her body to pieces and covered herself in honey. Mandy had died as she'd lived, nourishing her babies.